One of the questions that you guys have submitted that I love is, it's simple. Mars, how can we help?
In the short term, Mars is really about getting the spaceship built. That ship right now. I think right now that the biggest thing that would be helpful is just general support and encouragement. Now, once that has been built and there's a means of getting cargo and people to and from Mars as well as to and from the Moon and other places in the solar system, then I think that's really where there's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial resources that are needed, because you've got to build out the entire base of industry, everything that allows human civilization to exist. And anyone for the early people that go to Mars, it'll be far more dangerous. I mean, really, it kind of reads like Shackleton's ad for Antarctic explorers. You know, it's like difficult, dangerous, good chance you'll die, and they will start off building the most elementary infrastructure, just a base to create propellant, a power station, glass domes in which to grow crops, all the sort of fundamentals, without which you cannot survive. I think Mars should really have great bars, you know, the Mars bar. Sorry. We'll be able to do short flights, short sort of up and down flights, probably sometime in the first half of next year. What's amazing about this ship, assuming we can make full and rapid reusability work, is that we can reduce the marginal cost per flight dramatically, by orders of magnitude compared to where it is today. A BFR flight will actually cost less than our Falcon 1 flight did back in the day. Wow. So that was about a $5 or $6 million marginal cost per flight. We're confident that BFR will be less than that. And that is what will enable the creation of a permanent base on the Moon and a city on Mars. Well, at SpaceX, almost all my time is spent on engineering and design. It's probably 80 and 90%. And then Gwynne Shotwell, who's president and chief operating officer, takes care of the business operations of the company, which is what allows me to do that. Yeah, I think in order to make the right decisions, you have to understand something. And if you don't understand something at a detailed level, you cannot make a good decision. Well, in the case of SpaceX, I just kept wondering why we were not making progress towards sending people to Mars, why we didn't have a base on the Moon. Where are the sort of space hotels that were promised in 2001 in the movie? It's like, it just wasn't happening year after year. And as I got more and more into what it would take to do that, I learned that the fundamental issue is actually the cost of access to space. Rockets were super expensive, and the cost per pound or kilogram to orbit had actually gone up over the years, not down. And it was like, okay, well, it won't matter if we are able to do this philanthropic mission and it generates a lot of will to go to Mars. That's not going to matter if there's no way. I started reading a lot of books on rockets and did sort of a first principles analysis of a rocket, just broke down the materials that are in a rocket, what would it cost to buy those materials, what versus the price of the rocket, and there's a gigantic difference between the raw material cost of the rocket and the finished cost of the rocket.
How do you plan a business where the rocket business, some of these things are going to blow up on the launch pad? How does the business plan work?
I don't really have a business plan. For business time, almost all of it is really dedicated to SpaceX and Tesla. It may sound like I've got a lot of different endeavors, but it's overwhelmingly SpaceX and Tesla in terms of time allocation. In fact, the only public security that I own of any kind is Tesla. And then the next biggest is SpaceX. And then the Boring Company kind of started more as a joke, because that would be a funny name for a company. We put the zero in Bring. I mean, it's sort of like that doesn't make any sense. I'm really quite close to, I'm very close to the cutting edge in AI, and it scares the hell out of me. It's capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows, and the rate of improvement is exponential. You can see this in things like AlphaGo, which went from, in the span of maybe 6 to 9 months, it went from being unable to beat even a reasonably good Go player to then beating the European world champion, who was ranked 600, then beating Lisa Doll 4-5, who had been world champion for many years, then beating the current world champion, then beating everyone while playing simultaneously. Then there was AlphaZero, which crushed AlphaGo 100-0. And AlphaZero just learned by playing itself, and it can play basically any game that you put the rules in for. Whatever rules you give it, it literally read the rules, play the game, and be superhuman. I think probably by end of next year, self-driving will encompass essentially all modes of driving and be at least 100 to 200% safer than a person by the end of next year. We're talking like maybe 18 months from now. So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. We have to figure out some way to ensure that the advent of digital superintelligence is one which is symbiotic with humanity. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face, and the most pressing one. I'm not normally an advocate of regulation and oversight. I mean, I think one should generally err on the side of minimizing those things. But this is a case where you have a very serious danger to the public. And so therefore there needs to be a public body that has insight and then oversight on to confirm that everyone is developing AI safely. This is extremely important. I think the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. If you know that there's likely to be, we don't know, but there's likely to be another dark ages, which it seems, my guess is there probably will be at some point. I'm not predicting that we're about to enter dark ages, but that there's some probability that we will, particularly if there's a third world war. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of a seed of human civilization somewhere else to bring civilization back. But I think sustainable energy is also obviously really important. It's tautological. If it's not sustainable, it's unsustainable.
Yeah, how close are we to solving that problem?
Well, I think that the core technologies are there with wind, solar, with batteries. The fundamental problem is that there's an unpriced externality in the cost of CO2. The market economics works very well if things are priced correctly, but when things are not priced correctly, and something that has a real cost has zero cost, then that's where you get distortions in the market that inhibit the progress of other technologies. So essentially anything that produces carbon, it puts carbon into the atmosphere, which includes rockets, by the way. So I'm not excluding rockets from this. There has to be a price, and that you can start off with a low price, but then that price, and then depending upon whether that price has any effect on the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, you can adjust that price up or down. But in the absence of a price, we sort of pretend that digging trillions of tons of fossil fuels from deep under the earth and putting it into the atmosphere, we're pretending that has no probability of a bad outcome. We don't talk that much about Starlink, but essentially it's intended to provide low latency, high bandwidth internet connectivity throughout the world. There actually will not be enough cognitive processing power on board the satellite system to in any way be a Skynet thing. I think most likely the form of government on Mars would be somewhat of a direct democracy, where you vote on issues, where people vote directly on issues, instead of going through representative government. When the United States was formed, representative government was the only thing that was logistically feasible, because it was no way for people to communicate instantly. A lot of people didn't even have really access to mailboxes, or there wasn't even really the post office was very primitive. A lot of people couldn't write. So you had to have some form of representative democracy, or things just wouldn't work at all. But I think on Mars, most likely it's going to be everyone votes on every issue, and that's how it goes. There are a few things I'd recommend, which is keep laws short. Long laws, it's like that's something suspicious is going on if there's a long law.
Come with me where moonbirds hit the sky. And then you'll walk with me along the by on by. Okay, all together now. My little buttercup.
My little buttercup.
Has the sweetest. My little buttercup has the sweetest smile. Stay a while.
My little buttercup, why do you stay a while?
Won't you stay a while? Moonbeams meet the sky, and you and I will walk the by on by.
Well, this is really winning.